So here I am on Pelee Island. This is the most southern point of Canada inhabited by humans.
They look like now. I've never, well, I guess I've seen one from a distance.
What is it?
It's a morning warbler.
Have a look. Come on, Dave.
Oh, it's beautiful.
This is another morning warbler. Another morning. First time you guys come to the island?
Not the island. I've been here.
I've been here. To the station.
First time we've managed to get through because it's way drier this year.
Yeah, it's when you think of bird banding, that when I started about 20 years ago, that you think of putting the band on the bird, and that if it shows up elsewhere, there's been a tremendous amount learned about the longevity of birds, their migration routes, and it's really a remarkable tool for learning about the life of birds. I really like to point out that our main purpose for the banding is not so much returns. For every songbird, a bird about this size that's captured or banded, it's about 10,000 songbirds for every one that shows up elsewhere. And so it's interesting in a lot of people's minds. At one time, it was really useful to band as many birds as possible because there was so much to learn, but I really like to point out that we're using the banding for a really specific purpose. We're using it as a standardized counting tool. And that what we're trying to accomplish here each morning, that it's a migration monitoring station, which includes a bird banding station, but what our organization, the Pelee Island Bird Observatory, is trying to accomplish each day is to our best of our ability determine how many individuals of how many species are in the area each morning. We have a very clearly defined count area, and our job, the type of research is referred to as constant effort, because we are actually down here each morning for 76 mornings in a row in the spring and about 107 mornings in a row in the fall. So we're really interested in documenting not just when there are a lot of birds around, but also when there aren't many birds around. And we have a real commitment to monitoring each day. So again, I really like to clarify that the banding is being used as a standardized counting tool. We have 10 mist nets set up throughout the woodlot. We open them every morning at the same time each day. We close them at the same time. They've been in the same location for 10 years, and the premise behind the work is that if you take a consistent daily approach, it's possible to detect the long-term population changes of various species that we encounter. And it is a long-term project. It's considered sort of a minimum of 10 years before the data becomes meaningful. And this is now our 10th year of operation. And we're particularly interested in small migrant songbirds like this one here. He might be a little bit flappy, but this would be a lovely morning warbler. And it's a bird that winters in the sort of remote tropics in Central and South America, and nests a little bit further north from here. We'd call it a passage migrant because it's just passing through Pelee Island. They don't nest on the island. And we're particularly interested in a group of we count all the birds we see, but we're interested in a group of about 60 or 70 species that we refer to as neotropical migrants. So they nest in northern regions, winter in the south, and it's very difficult to study their populations on the wintering and summering grounds. So in effect, we're letting them come to us and counting them as they pass through Pelee Island. Of birds that are upwards of, we could expect to see 30 different types of species in the spring, and they definitely do tend to move in mixed flocks. And some mornings it's possible to encounter upwards of 25 different species sort of in mixed groups. Would be band 79?
Yes.
And I think probably, as you know, that each of these bands has a unique, distinct number on it, so that if this bird does appear anywhere else, and it's always exciting and there's still of value, but if this bird appears anywhere else, that if someone sends in the band number to the bird banding office in Ottawa, then it would be possible to trace back the origins of when this bird was banded to this location. And As I said, a great deal has been learned about how long birds live, where they migrate to, and things. So that's good. You can see it's a good fit on this on the two-wing. We'll also, and I'll explain a bit more, I won't spend too much time on any one bird, but I'm also going to blow gently on the feathers and actually see if there's any fat on the bird. That obviously for birds, this bird conceivably could have traveled 1,000 kilometers last night, and so obviously it needs fuel for that, and it takes the form of sort of a visible fat, sort of what, like when you think of a chicken and the sort of yellowish orange appearance. We'll go with the one fat on this bird. It doesn't have a lot of fat, which generally suggests that it's a bird that could well have arrived last night. Some mornings we can come in and all the birds have a great deal amount of fat, and we can sort of assume that they've been feeding up on the island. But other mornings we'll come down and the birds have no fat, and it strongly suggests they've just arrived on the island. So that's good. We'll also try and determine whether the bird is both the age of the bird and then also the sex as well. And I haven't seen so many this spring, but what do you think?
This is the third one this morning.
Is it? Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Do you think
the first
is there
one
enough
had
black?
more black.
Yeah, I think that's not a great deal of black. I just can't quite recall whether the females
Have a black.
yeah, would have that amount. I wonder if potentially a young male. What was the wing length? How does the wing compare to
It's
some of the others?
62.
And what were the others?
The other one is 59.
Oh, okay. I have a feeling it's probably a young male. Just have a little look at it. That's I don't think the female would have that much black on its face. But let's do that, and we can follow up in the book afterwards. But for now, to go 5141. There we go. And finally, now we've determined made an effort to determine the age and the sex. That we'll just get a weight on here as well. It'll be 11.4. I think a good comparison is that a loonie coin weighs 7 grams, basically, so that most of the birds that we're dealing with, some of them even weigh less than a loonie. Magnolia warbler, and this is actually a very common passage migrant in southwestern Ontario. Again, it doesn't nest in southwestern Ontario, but potentially sort of even again up 100 kilometers from here and such. And let's make the notes here.
Yeah, it's a beautiful bird, isn't it?
Yeah, this is, and in fact, as you saw in the book, this will be probably a young female. It's not as brightly marked as the males. Interesting wing length. No fat on her at all.
So would this bird have made the journey in one?
No, that there are some warblers and some species that will do just one direct flight, but I think that generally it tends to be drawn out a little bit more, and females aren't in as much of a rush to get up onto the breeding grounds. In terms of the males are really keen to get up early and establish the territories. Sort of traveled, I would say, 1,000 kilometers last night. But I think it's considered to be among the greatest energetic feats, I think, in nature in terms of some of the long distant migrants. There's
this particular bird?
Not this one, but just the long distance migration of birds. There is a warbler they're actually around in the area now. We haven't captured any, but a warbler that it's believed, it's called the blackpoll warbler. And all the evidence suggests that in the fall that they will amass just huge amounts of fat, say out in the Maritimes, say New Brunswick or Maine. And all the evidence suggests that they will depart from over the Atlantic and will not reach landfall until Venezuela. And that's a flight of over 4,000 kilometers, 80 hours of constant flight. So, as I said, that they're obviously delicate little things, but at the same time, that's a feat that it would be on. I think it's the equivalent of a human running a marathon for 80 consecutive hours.
And do we understand the trigger?
Yeah, there are a lot of factors. I don't actually have a science background myself, but over the years, I'll just point out to you here, just out of interest, that even that little sort of white feature there, which we refer to as a shaft streak, this will actually tell us that this was a bird that was hatched last year, basically. That we can't say with songbirds if they're 2 or 3 or 4 years old, but we can say whether they were hatched last year or some previous year. And that's a good, so we'll refer to this as a second year bird. It's in its second calendar year of life. And we can't really tell whether it's a male or a female. Send her along. It's a bit chunkier, it'll be 28.3.
And then you're going to release it.
Yeah.
So hang on, notice.
Yeah, have to be quick. Can you good there?
They're about the weight of a loony.
Yeah, in this case, just the loony's 7 grams and this bird's 7.6. So it's just leave feathers and I'll just send them off down here. There she goes.
No wish for wear.
Yeah, no, it is. We never keep any birds any longer than an hour under any circumstances. And when we don't have visitors and things, we can process them in a matter of minutes.
Which is about time for me to say goodbye then.
I'm sorry?
About time for me to say goodbye then.
No, not at all. No, I don't mean to say that at all. We're really, really receptive. We are primarily research oriented, but we recognize it's such a great learning opportunity and stuff. No, it's a non-profit. I established it 10 years ago, and we're members of a umbrella group called the Canadian Migration Monitoring Network, and so we're one of about sort of over 20 sister stations across the country. Let's have a look at this guy. This would be a Swainson's thrush. This is the bird I was telling you that they're incredibly secretive, that you can try and find them in the field. And there have been mornings here in the fall where we've captured 70 of them, whereas you might see 5 or 6. So they're really a secretive bird. Another passage migrant, so one that's not nesting on the island. And these are the birds we're primarily interested in, is the long distant passage migrants. And I think it's kind of a cliche, but it really is true, I think, to say that birds, sort of the canary in the coal mine idea, that birds are really good indicators of the overall health of the environment. And there's been really dramatic declines of a lot of still very common species. I think good examples, birds you can still go out into almost any woodlot and still see, but evidence suggests some of their populations have declined by 50–60% over the last 40 years. And so it's kind of a silent attrition rate. And so what we're really keen with our education is to draw attention to these declines before the birds get to the point of being endangered. There's a group, Partners in Flight, in the United States. It's actually a trilateral organization with Canada and Mexico and the States, and one of their mottos is keeping common birds common, and we really like that in terms of trying to draw attention to these declines before things get to the point of there being 10 left and what have you. That's good.
It's possible to get a picture of you doing that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see if you can.
You're looking for a yellow sac of fat.
That's right. Yeah, there's a cavity called a furculum, and the fat tends to deposit itself in that area. And I really like to point out also that they're obviously extremely delicate little creatures and things, but when you think of their life cycle and the fact that a bird that could potentially again travel 4,000 kilometers in a matter of weeks, that they're a pretty amazing mixture of resilience and delicacy in a way. And actually, this bird isn't too delicate.
So what type of lifespan do they have?
Ranges a great deal. I think that there's a huge mortality before birds make it out of the nest even. But if they do fledge and such, I would say a songbird like the mourning warbler, I think it's fair to say maybe an average lifespan of a few years, 3 or so. There are longevity records for birds that size of up to 10 years, so real exceptions and things, but they tend, larger birds obviously live longer, but the small songbirds that not a great deal of time.